Hey there, business builders. We've got a must-listen episode today where we discuss mental fitness with our guest, Tim Bishop. Focusing on the construction industry, where traditionally mental health hasn't been a key priority, we talk about how to foster a culture where mental health is valued just as much as physical safety. And Tim shares insights and strategies with us that are essential for developing a supportive workplace that champions mental fitness. Well, welcome to the Business Builders Podcast. We are your hosts. I am Brenton Gowland.
And I'm Ron Tomlin.
And Ron, it's been 4 weeks since our last podcast.
Don't remind me.
I know.
I feel very guilty.
Well, we got to get back into a 2-week cadence. So to all of you, our listeners, we will get back into a 2-week cadence soon, but it's been a busy time.
It's been very busy. I've started a new course, running a new 3-lecture course at uni.
Mm.
And yeah, it takes a lot to get that started because I'm getting used to their systems, but it's good. I love it.
Yeah, and I'm renovating a house and I've discovered my inner tradie.
Oh, wow.
But on that, if you've been waiting and going, what's going on with these guys? Why haven't we had an episode? It's worth the wait. Because today we've got with us the regional manager of the construction company BMD, Mr. Tim Bishop. Now, Tim will tell us about himself in a minute, but Tim, and the reason we've got him here is Tim's become an advocate in the mental health space, and I'll let him tell you how that came about, but he has been active in breaking the stigma in the construction industry about mental health. And I think that's a massively important thing because what I've learned of late, Ron, is that the construction industry has a very high rate of mental stress and unfortunately suicide.
It's not good.
No. But we've got someone here today, Tim, who has been an advocate for changing that. So welcome, Tim. How are you?
Good, thanks, gents. It's really good to be on the show today. I'm really just happy to share my story with you both and your listeners. So thank you for having me on.
That's great. And I heard a bit of your story a few years back, so I'm really excited to hear the full story. But before we get into that, Tim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about BMD and what it is you do in that construction company? I know you're the regional manager, but what does that mean?
Look, regional manager, so I sit above 2 state managers who look after South Australia and Victoria, so I'm there to support them. BMD is a national group of civil construction companies, so turns over about $2.4 billion this year. But it's the most significant thing for me and part of my journey is that it's still family owned. It's been something that is of pride to all of us, so we treat each of our business units like a family. And yeah, look, we're really proud of the business. It's expanded into the Philippines and into the UK recently over the last 12 months. So it's good to see an Australian-owned contractor taking on the big boys internationally.
And when we were having our pre-chat, you were saying that you'd be happy to be there in 40 years. That's a big call. You've only been there about 18, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in my 19th year at BMD. It's somewhere I never see leaving. It's a sense of pride in the workplace, but also that family. The business goes with you on life's journeys, the ups and downs, the lefts and rights, which we'll talk about a bit later. But,
yeah,
you know, it's somewhere that you're always challenged. It's always a diversification of industries or clients. It's always been growing and it continues to grow. And it's grown probably about 50% in the last 2 years through the kind of COVID recovery and infrastructure boom. So it's a company with lots of really good people, but also really good challenges to continue to face.
Well, not many people would be able to say that they'd want to be with a company their whole career. Do you come across many people like that, Ron, in your travels?
It used to be the norm. But the conventional wisdom now as you move around, it's great to hear that people are thinking what's right for them and not just following the conventional wisdom. And it's great to hear that companies are engendering that type of loyalty and sense of ownership.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen often. I don't see it that often. But I know a lot of people try and do that.
Well, our series at the moment is on life-work balance, as we talked about before we came in here. And if you've been listening over the last, I think 10 episodes almost, then you'll know that we've been talking about life-work balance and how important that is for our mental health, how important it is for our ability to get things done and our productivity. So today, our focus is on mental health and how that affects life-work balance. And in particular, Tim, how have you become a vocal advocate for mental health awareness in the construction industry and your workplace?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey for me. I know when I moved to Adelaide about 9 years ago and discovered Mates in Construction as a mental health support to our industry, They were involved in our business day to day. I was a massive champion of what they were doing.
Now, just sorry to cut you off. That's the first time you've mentioned Mates in Construction. Do you just want to explain what that is in relation to BMD?
So Mates in Construction is an industry-based charity, and they do mental health awareness and training in our industry at a number of different levels. But they've been going really, really well. They are expanding into other industries as well, mining and manufacturing and those kind of things. But in the civil construction space, they were generally omnipresent on our construction sites. We did induction training with them on every project we did. They have a wonderful group of speakers. Bob Clifford, who's recently retired, but they've got Mariam's just celebrated something like 75 talks. But they've trained tens of thousands of people in mental health support. And it's really challenging for me because when I was going through the deepest challenges of my life in mental health, we were never more active with Mates in Construction. They were doing so much work in and around our business, which is something we're really proud of. But I was also going through this downward spiral in my own mental health. So it kind of coincided with that journey. So I'm really lucky that they were there when I needed them most.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because that was the catalyst for you becoming an advocate for mental health.
Yeah, so mid-2018, so July 2018, I think I'd been going down a period of about 18 months before that where I had those fleeting moments of, hey, I'm not sure if I really want to be here. And that kind of happened once a month, and then it kind of happened once every 3 weeks and once a fortnight, and once a fortnight turned into once a week, and once a week turned into every day. And that took a period of about 18 months, and I finally reached out to Mates in Construction. I didn't reach out to my family and my friends or my work. I'd had that relationship with Mates in Construction and phoned up their crisis line, which in hindsight was a brave thing to do. But I think they were just really, really supportive. You know, they pointed me in the right direction to get help from doctors, and they referred us to our employee assistance program and those kind of things. But yeah, I wasn't prepared to talk to anyone else but them. So it's probably a testament to the impact that they have on our industry and the people in it, and they help an awful lot of people. I'm not the only one they help. So I think from that, I reached out to them. I went and had some counselling. I went to see a doctor. I've never seen a doctor so scared in my life. When I did a stress, anxiety and depression test in front of a doctor, she sat down and said, I don't actually want you to leave the room. But I think what happened there is I went to get help, and I went to a counsellor, and she said, hey, is there anyone else in your industry that you can lean on who has gone on this journey? And I said, I don't know. When I did a fair bit of research over that kind of 6 or 8 weeks, the first 6 or 8 weeks with the counsellor, and I couldn't find anything. And I was talking to my counsellor, and she said, hey, look, you've bottled things up for so many years. How about you write some of it down, and would you like to talk about it? So we kind of, as part of a strategy to help my mental health, I wrote an article that I shared with you in our industry magazine that opened some doors and got some general awareness in the industry nationally. And I ended up talking in Melbourne at a Roads Australia safety conference. But I think that was the driver for me. I said, hey, if I'm going to go through this journey, which is painful, and it was long and painful to recover my mental health, I just said, hey, I'm going to take the industry on the journey with me, and the support of Roads Australia, the Civil Construction Federation, BMD were absolutely amazing. They let me fly around the country in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, and just have a really honest conversation. And that's part of why I'm here today, is to continue that conversation. And I just wanted to be a leader who stood up and said, hey, life's not perfect. We all have challenges. And I think the only way we're going to change all of our industries is if we have a culture where people can actually put their hand up and say, hey, I'm not in a good spot right now. And can we work through it?
Wow, that is brave.
Absolutely. And what's great to hear is that, number one, you were brave enough to do that, but there were people willing to listen and help and support. And I think it's becoming normalized now, but I still think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think humans are basically really good people, right? People want to listen and help each other, but I think we've had a culture where we get to a point where we say, hey, we'll just deal with it, and we'll deal with it behind closed doors. And I think we've spoken about this a little bit before, but I think men in particular and in male-dominated industries, there's this attitude that you've got to be the breadwinner and provider, and you've got to be the strong family man. And at work, you've got to be the strong leader that doesn't show any weakness. Civil construction's a really tough industry. Showing weakness is seen as being soft is shown as a sign of weakness, and it's not really.
No. I mean, if you watch any of the TED Talks that Brenton and Ron has given, she often talks about, people who have shared are some of the bravest, most courageous people she's ever met. And being vulnerable, unfortunately, the term vulnerable implies weakness, but it's not.
Mm.
I mean, when you talk about people who are like Tim, who are willing to share their story, it's not an easy thing to do. You've got to have a lot of courage to do it.
Mm.
So vulnerability is not about weakness. It's actually about strength.
I think to really highlight that courage too, Tim, because, there's a number of facets to your story. So the first one that springs to mind is you went to mates in construction to have that conversation, but you didn't, because I know this because we just had the chat earlier, you didn't tell your family, you didn't tell your workmates. How did you communicate it with them? And how long did it actually take to get to a place where you recovered, and what was the process?
Yeah, it's when we talk about strength and vulnerability and bravery, I still wouldn't say I was the bravest when I told my workplace and my wife. I reached that point where I was at absolute despair and phoned mates, and then the next morning I actually sent my workmates and my manager an email. I couldn't pluck up the words to physically say it to them, and I couldn't pluck up the words to tell my wife in person. And I actually forwarded my wife the email that I sent my work and said, "Hey, you need to read this email. I can't articulate what I want to talk to you about," which in hindsight is probably not the way I would like to handle it again. But that would tell you the really challenging point I was in. Like nothing made sense.
But that's what growth is all about, and you've come a long way since then.
Yeah, look, it takes a lot to recover, and I think that's where people kind of misunderstand challenges with mental health. Like I went to a doctor, I was medicated, right? That's not a bad thing. It was just to get you in a safe spot so that you can actually deal with the counselling and the processing of challenges and trauma in your life. And you need to get in a safe spot. And that's, why the doctor was so horrified when I first saw her. She's like, "You're off the charts here, mate. You're in a really dangerous place." And medication takes at least a month to kind of kick in. So your doctors and your counsellors are really, really worried in that first month when you're going through these battles. So yeah, it's a challenge communicating that to people. And I think that's when you're most vulnerable, but I think it's when you need an employer and your home life to understand what you're going through. And I think that's advocacy is about raising that awareness and saying, hey, for me, the more people who know about mental health and it's destigmatized, it's no different to having cancer or having a heart attack, and it's just a medical condition, right?
Mm.
It's just something that's normal. It's a normal part of life. You're not mentally healthy for periods of your life.
What I think your story highlights for me is how hard it is for people to actually mention it that first time that there's something going on. And we talked about the construction industry earlier about the rate of suicide. And I think that's a testament to the fact that people find it really hard to talk about. And so you took those first steps in the best way you could, but now you can articulate it like a muscle. You use it and it will grow. You can articulate it to groups of 1,000 people that you speak to, which I'm not sure if our listeners would realize that, but from your story, you've been around the country speaking at big gigs, talking about mental health.
Yeah, and I think at every single one of those events, 4 or 5 people have come up to me afterwards and said, hey, look, I'm really struggling. How do I get some help? So I think it's being able to articulate that journey is just one that it needs honesty, right? You need to be able to say, I'm not good. I'm okay. I'm really good today. You're not always depressed. I'd hit a point where I was medically sick, and it's really challenging to explain to someone when people say, hey, look, I've got a wonderful wife. She's amazing. I've got a wonderful employer, a really good group of mates. And everyone goes, well, how do you get to the point where you don't want to be here anymore? And I said, well, I was sick. Like I'd reached a point of absolute logic where I thought that my family, my friends were better off without me. And it's absolute logic. And now I'm healthy and recovered. I don't know how I got to that spot, trauma and all those things. I know through that, but you just go, the absolute clarity of this is the number one thing I need to do is something that I'll never forget. But I just don't think people can understand where you are in that space unless you've actually been there.
And unless people talk about it. So you've mentioned the importance about opening up about mental health, which is really what saved you, the fact that you were willing to do that. What advice would you give to someone in a leadership situation or the leadership position who is currently feeling the same mental health challenges that you felt, but feels he needs to maintain that strong front that you talked about?
Yeah, I think every leader that you're looking at around you and you're feeling nervous about talking to them about whether they've been through a similar journey, you will find that they probably have. Might not be for the same situation, but, I've been to business builders and I've been to SA leaders and those kind of organizations and spent a lot of time with other senior leaders, and the overriding honesty that you get in those things is you've got CEOs who have got no idea about marketing, or they're not very good at finance, all these kind of things. And everyone's got an issue, right? Everyone is at these events because they want to learn and improve themselves. And talking about your mental health to fellow leaders is often a bit of a safety net for you, because you probably don't feel comfortable talking in your own organization about it. You don't feel comfortable talking down. But I think there's plenty of organizations and support out there at the same level. Would be a first good interim step, I would suggest.
Yeah, right.
So becoming part of those networks is what you're saying is the first step.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, it sounds like Mates in Construction kind of did that in the construction industry, because you said they were embedded and intrinsic in your inductions on work sites. And that really strikes me as pretty unique and cool in a way, because you had this comfort level with them because they were always there, right? And I think what I'm hearing is it's the same kind of thing. You're rubbing shoulders with people in business networking kind of arenas where, and we all know it when we've been in leadership roles or a CEO, everyone's got the same issues. When you eventually open up and talk about it, you're all having the same kind of questions. So being able to talk about it is good, but you get used to these people. So you start with those kind of conversations.
Yeah, you do. And it's how you improve as a leader, right? I think I've spent a lot of the last 3 years having business coaches and those kind of people come into our business to help me be a better leader. And I think that's one of the challenges of leadership. Good leaders lean on the people around them to learn and grow as leaders. You don't suddenly become a great leader overnight, and you don't suddenly become an Elon Musk. Like, he's got his own challenges in different parts of his leadership, but like, there's no perfect CEO. There's no perfect leader. So we're all learning as we go.
That's right.
And I think that's a really important point for anyone, is that the old model of a natural born leader really doesn't exist. You learn leadership and you develop your leadership and you improve, hopefully, your leadership over time. It's not something that you're just born with. And, that's that whole thing about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset and all that sort of fun stuff that we don't have time to go into today. But it's important. It's really important. And I mean, that's the benefit I get for those groups of CEOs that I work with, is that they have a space where they can talk to other leaders in a safe environment. It makes all the difference for them.
Yeah, and it's so important, because I know, again, in our pre-chat, I was talking about a group I'm involved with, and for the first time, I'll share this, for the first time in a long time, a week ago, I felt depressed, and I haven't felt depressed in years. I don't know why. That's just the way I'm wired. 10 or 15 years ago, that wasn't the way I was wired. But yeah, it was because I was doing this house renovation that I mentioned earlier that just will never end, and it's so all-consuming that we're only doing a podcast every 4 weeks at the moment. And I'm like, when will this end? Anyway, and it got to that point, but I was with that group and I just articulated it. And then I think they took me out for drinks so we could talk about it. So that was great. But look, we've mentioned Mates in Construction a number of times. So I think it's really important if we could discuss the role of programs like that. And I don't know how much you know about Mates in Construction and how it came to be, but it sounds like obviously it's embedded in the construction industry, and other industries will have similar things, I hope. But can we talk about Mates in Construction and perhaps employee assistance programs and their role in supporting mental health and life-work balances? So my question is really, how can businesses better implement and encourage use of these kind of programs, Tim?
Yeah, I think employee assistance programs have their place and time in every organisation, right? And it can be an easy way to allow access for your staff to get some quick support. They are part of the solution. They are not the solution.
Okay.
Most EAP programs, you kind of have 4 or 6 sessions that you can go to, but they're really to get you through either some informal advice, and some of them do financial things and some health things. And, most people would associate them with, hey, I'm having a crisis, and it's a kind of around mental health in our discussion today, but they are only part of the solution. They're set up to deliver support to what are quite substantial organisations. And we spoke about it earlier. When you've got an organisation that's got less than 15 or 20 people, it's really challenging to have an EAP provider that suits your business. Ours works pretty well. It wasn't without its challenges that through that process, and BMD and myself have taken a lot of learnings from how EAP works through this process. And I shared with you the first counsellor I had was not a good fit for me, to put it succinctly. And I ended up on a second counsellor. And that's a very common outcome of EAP programs, that first counsellor doesn't fit, go and see another one. And it takes a bit of time. But I think they are really, really important. But as a leader, you can't rely on them to fix your issues. You need to have a culture and an environment where you can talk about it within your workplaces, because it's a Band-Aid, right? EAP is a Band-Aid. It's a good Band-Aid. But it's something that you're only going to fix those issues if you have a culture in an organisation where you can actually say, hey, I'm not having a good day.
And how did that culture get built in BMD?
Family values. Our number one value is family, right? And that doesn't mean you always get on really, really well. Families challenge each other. That's what good families do. But it's all about culture. And look, we've been on a journey as a business, male dominated, and we're up to 19% female participation this week. And it's International Women's Day today. So we're diversifying our workforce, which is a good thing. It's not just good for women coming into our industry, but I think the diversification of our workforce really breaks that male stigma and traditional male roles in our industry.
Tell me something else. Do you think, and this is just an out there kind of question, because we were talking about this earlier, we asked Tim the question, why do you think the construction industry has such a high rate of suicide? And the first thing you said was there's such a high percentage of males, it's male dominated. Do you actually think that has anything to do with it? Because what I'm kind of inferring is you're saying you're 19% now. Does having a mixed gender balance mean a more open dialogue within a business? I'm just curious.
I think it does. And I will caution that with what I say at my presentations around the country. It is not up to the females within a business to be the soft and gentle ones to create a culture around mental health awareness. It is a business challenge. I think what we're coming from is a generational backlog. Civil's always been male dominated. That is changing. But I think it's also about how we raise our kids. It's about how engineers come out of uni. The cultural ingrained male, macho, alpha male leadership is changing slowly. And it's when I talk about mental health around the country, it's going, hey, this is a generational change. We're making good progress. It's probably not quite fast enough. And all civil construction companies saying, hey, we can all do a bit more. But I think it's going to take us kind of 20 or 30 years to get that gender balance a bit better. And I think it's going to be...
the gender landscape is changing as well. So that's complex.
Yeah, it is. And it's going to be a step by step. But I think to get that balance right and to get culture right, it needs years and years of work. And I think I'm lucky that I've come from a business that's been going since 1979, and that culture is firmly embedded in that business about wanting to help. But the industry's only really been on this journey for, what I've been doing has been about 5 years, but mates have been going for probably 10 or 12 years doing some really good work. But we're in the initial phases of this journey. I think we'll be in a hugely different space in another 10 years, but I still don't think it's going to be business as usual for a number of years.
Yeah, right.
You've obviously had some success within your company and your industry in raising awareness about mental health and getting people to start talking about it. What would you suggest other people do? They may not be in construction, and they might not have the difficulties that you've had because of those profiles or those archetypal type of leadership styles, but they still have challenges. So what would you suggest to other leaders about getting similar dialogues in their industry or in their company?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things we've done as a business is incorporate into our meetings, go and give us some good news, personal and professional, and let us know what's going on in your life. And you find people say, hey, yeah, look, there's nothing good going on. And that's a trigger point for you, right? If you create an environment where you're asking people about how they are and what's good and what's bad, they often won't respond negatively. There'll just be a lack of positivity. So I think there are a number of small tools that you can create in your meetings and your daily workflow, whichever industry you're in, and going, hey, let's just bring a bit of that, how are you all going, into your business day to day.
Well, that's really interesting, because when I was younger, there was an attitude, and this gets to the point that you were talking about in generational change. There was an attitude that was embedded in people that, when you go to work, it's about work and you don't talk about home. And as a leader, I don't want to know about your personal life. That, I'm happy to say, is changing, but it sounds like some people aren't changing that. They're still keeping that separation. How important is it to want to understand the whole person that is working with you as a leader?
Yeah, look, when you care about someone's career progression and long-term career within your organization, I think you need to understand what's going on at home. I am clear and BMD are clear. So we can't solve everyone's issues at home, right? We can create an environment where they can talk about it and we can point them in the right direction and we can guide them and we can support them. But I think some businesses are scared that if you take on employees' problems, that you kind of open yourself up to fixing them. And that's not the reality, right? And Scott, who's the CEO of BMD, is going, hey, we can't fix everyone's problems. And he's right. And I'm 100% supportive of that. Like, work can point you in the right direction, provide you that support so that you have the best chance of being healthy at home and performing really, really well at work. So I think there's a balance when they overlap. And there's also, when we talk about work-life balance, going, hey, we want people to go home safe and well to their families and enjoy the time with their families. They go to work to get fulfillment, but they also go to work to earn some money so they can spend it enjoying life with their family.
Yeah. And it kind of says, how far does our duty of care go? And realistically, the duty of care is, well, that period of time people are at work, maybe when they're traveling to and fro. But that then also, as you were kind of saying, it encompasses mental health, because what happens in the workplace is a direct result of that. And yes, we can't fix people's problems, but I like that human element that you're talking about bringing into discussions in the workplace. I think that's really good.
Yeah, you've got to have it. And I think if I take a fiscal perspective, and I'm pretty honest about these things, if someone cuts their hand at work, they're off work for a couple of days, costs the business a couple of $1,000s, right?
Yes.
Not great, but that's the reality. But mental health claims in our industry are averaging around 13 weeks of lost time, and they're costing per person, and they're costing about $50,000 to $60,000 per case in terms of WorkCover claims.
Wow.
So when you look at the return on investment you get by investing in your team and prioritizing their mental health, you're actually working in your own financial best interest, as well as being a good human being and a good leader and a good boss, right?
That is great. Look, I think a lot of people understand that. Like, when you're a business owner and you've got a business of 15 people, dealing with the mental part of people's challenges is so tough, because you've got so many competing issues when you're in a small business. But when you put it in context like that could cost you an extra 60 grand, it puts things in perspective, because when you're a small business owner, you're running around trying to plug a leaky ship very often, or get the ship steered in the right direction without losing too much along the way. So that just puts it in perspective about how important it is, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I'm really proud of, and we had a quick catch up about earlier. When I spoke in Melbourne, that first talk had a bit of a profound effect on the CCF president who was over there at the time, and they went and said, hey, we need to make some change. And they went to government and they got millions of dollars worth of funding, right? But they got that funding because the lost productivity in our industry is in the tens of billions of dollars. And their version of WorkCover is having increasing claims paid out every single year around employees' mental health challenges, right? So it's the biggest ticking time bomb in terms of WorkCover claims, probably nationally. We're doing good work on asbestos and silicosis and all the kind of things that you see going on in the national press, but mental health and the cost WorkCover claims is going through the roof. And look, ultimately we all pay for that as taxpayers. Every dollar that gets paid out gets recouped, right?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so, and this is the thing. there's a human cost, but there's also a cost to the entire community. And the more that we can help people justify doing something, business owners, and they are motivated by making sure that the organization is sustainable, and I mean that in a business sense, I think more of that type of conversation needs to be had, that this is a financial and a human, the whole ESG thing, environmental, social governance.
Yes.
It's the buzzword at the moment that everyone tends to be talking about. It is really important that this gets included in that whole conversation. It's not just about the environment or ecological environment. It's about the environment we put our people into.
Yeah.
So based on your experience, and now that you're in a better place in regards to your mental health, Tim, can you give us some insights into how you would now navigate your mental health challenges and maintain a healthier work-life balance?
Yeah, look, for me, it's just about having communication about how I'm feeling as a regular part of my life. So I go back to that basics of meetings and pre-starts and all the soft things that you do within your business, but also just being honest with your workmates and your colleagues about how busy your life is or what's going on at work. And they don't need to know the finer details of it, but you can have conversations as a leader with your team saying, I'm really under the pump at the moment. If I'm a bit short, pull me up on it. You need to work better on it, but you just need to have conversations. Say, hey, look, I'm in a high stress environment at the moment. Or you go, hey, I'm in a really good spot. But I think having those conversations means that you monitor and your workmates monitor and your team monitor each other. And the more you do those kind of small check-ins, it becomes business as usual and it will flow through your work team. So whether you're a CEO with a company of 1,000 employees or you've got 5 employees, making those conversations regular is really important. Like personally, I take heaps of photos of the good things in my life and post them on Instagram. That's my mental health diary. But I'm always having people around me check in and just say, hey, mate, how you going? And just giving them an honest answer.
Does that come about because of your honesty with mental health back in the day, or?
It probably has directly to me, but I think they ask those same questions of other leaders that they interact with. So I think I'd like to think there's a positive impact of what we've been doing as an industry, but it's really common for me to walk into high-level meetings in our industry board, for example, and the first question someone asks another leader is going, hey, mate, I know you're under the pump. You're really busy. You're late to the meeting. You're always on the phone. Are you okay? And that simple question of, are you okay? People do think twice, and then you might have to prompt a second question, but people generally will be honest with you if you ask a couple of direct questions.
Okay. So look, as we're coming to the end of our time today, the Business Builders podcast is all about giving practical advice. So we're looking for your top 3 recommendations or tips for business leaders about how they can improve or work to improve the mental health inside the businesses that they operate. How can we help other people start this journey in their businesses
and ourselves? I think it starts with the individual themselves, but it also is thinking about the mental health of other people in the organization too.
Yeah, so you have to lead from the top, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Modeling, it's called.
So Tim, over to you.
I think the number one thing for me is seek first to understand, and that's a kind of leadership mantra that's been bandied around for a number of years. But when I refer to the HR and performance challenges we have with our workforce from time to time, the first question that we want our leaders to ask is, how do we get here and what's going on in your life? Because people don't go to work to deliberately underperform.
It's a very good point.
Humans want to go to work and have fun, work hard, earn some good money and go home. They don't come to work to underperform. So when you ask them those holistic questions, usually you'll find out that, you might be having a blue with the wife, or you might be having some financial dramas short term, and you can work around that as a business leader. So I think asking your team and asking yourself to understand what that person is in and the situation they're in is the number one fundamental for me. The second one is just having conversations around mental fitness or mental health, whichever way you want to term it, as part of your everyday ongoing workflow and work meetings from the start of the day to the end, and celebrating success. BMD is an amazing company. We want to know that people are having fun at the weekend and having good times with their families.
I like that term, mental fitness.
It's been the probably the biggest change I've seen in the last 2 years in discussions around mental health. It's changed from a mental health discussion to a mental fitness, because mental health is I'm either healthy or I'm not. And fitness is a level of, can I run a kilometre, or can I run 5Ks, or can I run a marathon?
That's really smart.
And it also, it comes to the resilience and I can be active in this. I think that's a really good perspective to have.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Third one?
Third one is around that work-life balance. And I work in an industry where the working hours do not change. It's something that we have a bit more flexibility that we're working through, but it's a tough industry. The working hours are always going to be long, but it's going, hey, how do you make that 10 or 12 hours at work as good as it can be, but also give your employees the opportunity to turn off when they go home? And there's some legislation coming around from the Labor Party around the right to disconnect and those kind of things. But there's a balance with that. Like, I have a role where I'm available most evenings, but it's about going, if I go to work and I'm comfortable and I'm happy, the odd disturbance outside of work hours is not a big thing, because we've created an environment where you can separate the two.
Okay. So let's model this. Tim, what's your mental fitness like right now?
I'm going to be honest, it's been pretty average for the last month. I've had a lot going on at work and at home. My wife's been a bit crook, but I've had good friends really reaching out saying, hey, how are you going? And I've had an honest conversation going, yeah, at the moment is a bit average. Like, I got a couple of extra pounds around the belly and my fitness isn't quite where it needs to be. If you'd asked me that same question 3 months ago, I would have said, hey, it's the best it's ever been. You go in and out of peak performance with your mental health pretty quickly, right? It doesn't take too much to knock you down, but also if you have those tools and those people around you that you can have honest conversations, you can rebound really, really quickly. So yeah, I reached out to a good friend a few days ago and we're going to have a catch up for a coffee, but that's like a sign and a warning sign that I need to be aware of that. But yeah, I think it's constant work in progress.
And Ron, how's your mental fitness?
Yeah, I'd be mirror what Tim said. A few knocks around the place, but then you do something about it, and being aware that there are going to be times when things are tough, and I need to trim the cloth according to what's happening in my life. So yes, I probably need to take a little bit. I've put a lot of workload on me at the moment, and I need to take some time to do the things I enjoy. So I will.
And I'm about the same. I shared with you guys in our pre-chat that I'd been depressed for the first time in a while because of this house that I've been renovating. And I felt that we were just about finished. And then we basically accidentally knocked this hole in a wall because it was rotting with mold behind it. And all of a sudden despair just hit me, like, this project is never going to end. But what's really helped me is my partner has been right there with me. She's been painting the place and knocking down walls, and I'm repairing them. I'm joking, we're doing it together. But the thing that's struggled with me is it's kept me away from work. It's kept me away from, being consistent with the podcast and so forth. And when I'm not consistent, that causes mental dramas with me. But the thing that's helped was actually the other week, and you were there talking about it with a group of people at the pub. That was quite helpful. But I feel there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because I know that for me, it's literally that house will be finished within 4 weeks. And then I feel like the world's going to open up again. That's
and
at least
we're back onto a schedule with the podcast. Yeah, there you go.
So I think the way we're going to end today is, everyone out there who's listening today, what is your mental fitness like right now? So the task that I would suggest, and this is, you check me with this, Tim, is that you should check in with how many people on this do you think? Just one or a couple?
I think 2 or 3, right? And just ask the question and say, how do you think I'm going at the moment? People give you a pretty honest answer when you ask them pretty simple questions. Okay. Go to your wife and say, how do you think I'm going at the moment? And they said, hey, you might be down or you might be up. But just ask 2 or 3 different people and have a check-in.
Okay, so before our next podcast episode, listeners, go and ask someone how they think you're doing and assess your mental fitness at the moment and what you need to do about it. I think it's important. I think we all are the same, whether we're Tim, Ron, Brenton, or anyone who's out there working away in a business. We've all got the same struggles and issues, and I think it helps to, as Tim said, bring that human element into it. So Tim, thank you very much. That was actually really good. Learned a whole bunch of things in there. I love that mental fitness thing.
There you go. We've uncovered something that we can maybe take into the future with our podcast.
Agreed. And Ron, will we be back in 2 weeks?
We will be. Less than that, maybe.
Okay, we commit to that, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks. Bye for now.